In this video, I think we can cover quite a lot of bases. We're going to look at creating some 3D animation for images which rotate on screen to display 4 more behind. You've seen an example of that in the previous video when we did a little pre-planning for this. I think we're also going to gain some experience on the position of multiple images within our slideshow aspect ratio. We do need to give some thought to the images we use. Their aspect ratio is what I've got in mind here, and perhaps size too in some instances. We're going to be using parent and child animation, and with 3D that also needs a little bit of thought, and that's why I created those blanks 1, 2, 3, 4. We're also going to get the opportunity here to look at the multiple selection of images and keyframes, and also the setting of multiple keyframe values. Speed is also going to be a feature of this animation, so we need to set that. And finally, once we've got it all created, we can either use this animation in a current slideshow project, or we can create a slide style from it. You can see I've made a start by just bringing the first of my images down. This is the one that's going to form my background. And in the previous video we did a little bit of pre-planning, and we did come to a decision that we're probably going to need at least 24 seconds as the slide duration to carry out what we want to do. So we may as well put that in that bottom right corner of the thumbnail straight away, because when we open this up in the objects and animation screen, we need space to do what we need to do. First thing I need to do here then is to clear the bounding box around the edge of my background image. Although we're going to be using the parent and child relationship, we don't want it with our background. We want that to remain independent. So I'm going to click into the grey area, go to the top of the screen to add an image, and I need to navigate to where we're working. And the images I'm going to bring on screen, I think, are these first 4. I'll do it all together by selecting them all and opening them. Now, before we do anything with those 4 images, I'd like to suggest we take a look at the file names on the right hand side. I think it may be helpful if we rename some of these. Now we can do that using the properties section over here. Now I know this image is my background, that's the black and white car. I know that because it's at the bottom of the stack, and that's the image I selected first. So I could go up here and change the name of that. It doesn't change the name of the image in the file list in the other screen, just within the objects and animation screen. Then what I may choose to do with each of these images in turn, you can see that 1 is down the bottom, 2, 3, 4. We can move these around. For example, if I hold the control key and hit the page up, you can see I can jump number 1 to the top, then I can do number 2 and 3. So we've got all of these things we can do which make life easier for us. You can do the same thing with a right click. It's in the order. You can see bring to front, center back, forward 1, back 1. So you're just moving them up and down the stack. But what I'm going to suggest we do with number 1 is maybe we call this one TR, which is just an abbreviation for top. Let's make it left. Top left. The next one will be the image for top right. The next one can be the image for bottom left. And finally, bottom right. It just may make things a little easier to follow. The next thing I'm going to do is to hold my control key and select all 4 of those images, and then going over to the left hand side I'm going to do the same and select all 4 of those keyframes, because I want to go to the animation screen and I want to make these images smaller. But now I can click and drag and I can make all of them smaller. Now I'm not exactly sure how big they need to be because I haven't laid them out on the background just yet. But from past experience, I know I'm probably going to need something between, I don't know, 44 to 47. I'm going to put them in the middle around 45. We can always adjust these a little bit later. But what I need to do now is to put them in place. So I need to come over here and just select the one for top left, because I want to click and drag that to the top left, select top right, bottom left, bottom right. So there's the basis of what we want to do. Now we've got to spend a little bit of time getting these images perfectly in place. Now it may help us if we put a thin line around the outer edge, so let's do that too. And once again, we can do that in one go by selecting all of those inset images, either with the Control key, or select the first, hold the Shift key and select the last, and all those in between will be selected. If I go to the properties and the border, here I'm going to put 0.5. Maybe I'll put a little more just to make sure we can see it. Let's go up to 8. I'll be a little bit bold here to try to make things a little easier. And then go back to my top left image. And also I'd like to go back to my animation tab. So what we need to do here is to more or less space these out. Now we can do it by eye just to get it more or less right. That looks okay. Remember, we're working with 16:9 aspect ratio images here, so we're not going to get the gaps absolutely perfect. But if we want these to be a little bit spread out a little more, we can do that. But I would suggest a lot of this is a little bit more personal rather than purely right or wrong. Maybe it's the up and down which we need to concentrate on, but let's say we want something like that. Let's take the top left image for the moment. We can see that we've got values in here of minus 48.5. Let's go to a nice round figure of 50 and see what that does. That doesn't look too bad, but maybe it's a little bit too far to the left. So I'm going to use my up arrow to come back, and I'm going to place it at 48, which means this one also needs to be at 48, but not minus 48, 48. And now I get the opportunity to look at the gaps and think, yep, I can live with that. Let's assume for the moment that we can. What we've also got is the Y value, which, as we know, if we hit the up and down arrows, is the up and down movement. I think I'm a little bit tight to the top, so I can bring this down a little bit. And it doesn't look too bad at 48 there, so I'm going to risk that. Just going to overtype minus 48 to tidy this up, which means this one here needs to be 48. And I'm just getting a feel for the gap here, here and here, and that looks okay. But I've still got to do the sideways movement here. But if we select this one and it's 48, then this one needs to be the same in the X value. You can see the logic of what we're doing here. So let me get these last two in place. This one needs to be minus 48, and this needs to be 48, and so on. That's 48, and that should be minus 48. So what we've done there in that few minutes is to get the images perfectly placed where we want them. So if we've not already done so, now would be a good point to close the Objects and Animation screen and to save a project file. Placing that project file where you're working with all of your images. So at least if we have to close down and walk away, we know that the work we've done so far is safely stored. Now we can refer to that piece of paper where we did that bit of planning. And I'm going to select the top left image, and I'm going to try to get everything as perfect as I can here. Not only will that reassure me if I've got the slide time right at 24 seconds, but I want to make sure that the spinning round is looking good and the speed is right. So let's make a start. Looking down at my piece of paper, at the start I don't want anything to show with these images until the 4-second point. Remember, we went 2 seconds in for the fade, so we want this keyframe here to be at the 4-second point. And at that point we want the image here to be transparent. So let me work this through as it's going to happen. So I'm going to drag that down to 0. I'm going to right click that keyframe and I'm going to clone another, because we decided that between 4 and 7 seconds we wanted the image to fade up. So at that keyframe we want the opacity back up. My piece of paper now says that I need 5 seconds to view this and the other images when we get them set up as well. So I'm going to right click again, or you can use the Alt Enter key or Alt Insert key. I shouldn't say Enter, Alt Insert, to clone a keyframe. This one needs to be placed at the 12-second point, because between this keyframe and this keyframe we want this image and the others to do nothing. But now we come to the 3D rotate, and we felt that 3 seconds was probably going to be enough. So right click again, I knocked that off a little bit there, so right click, clone a keyframe, that should be 15 seconds, and between that keyframe and this keyframe I want to rotate Y. On that top left one I want it to go that way, so I'm going -180. And as you can see, I generally favour typing the values in. So if I put my cursor there, that doesn't look too bad at 3 seconds, and we haven't put any speed yet. But of course once they all turn round, then we need another 5 seconds to view the images. So right click, clone a keyframe, and this one needs to be at 20 seconds. From 20 to 22, probably could do with another 2 seconds here. Now I'm coming to put these along the timeline, but we'll risk it. So between here and here we want nothing to happen, but now I want a 2-second fade. So right click, clone a keyframe, so that needs to be at 22. I'd like the image that's on the other side to fade out, but we can fade out this one here, so we can just select this one and we can go to our opacity and we can drop it down. So let's take a look at, let's put that hard on there so we can see it disappear. Let's take a look at what we've got. Fade on, view the background for 2 seconds. All 4 images will come up together, although they don't have to, you can stagger them. 5 seconds to view them. Then we get the turnaround, and we'll eventually have a different image on reverse. Another 5 seconds to view them, and then 2 seconds to fade off. We could do with another 2 seconds, I think, to allow a little bit of time to reveal that background again before it fades off screen. But I emphasize that's probably more personal than a right or wrong. But I'm going to go out of my objects and animation screen, and you can see that bit of planning was more or less right. I've just made a small tweak just to adjust the end. So 15 to 20, whoops, let's hit Control Z. Anytime you inadvertently move things, and I'm using a graphics tablet so it's easy to do this, easier than a mouse, just hit Control Z. So this one needs to go back to the 22-second mark. It will always change if it's linked to the end of the fade or in this position, but it's no great problem, because if we put 22 back there, then we've got our 2 seconds before the background fades off. So we've done the animation as we think is correct. Let's put the cursor back to that point and just watch that again. Looks okay, but the only thing we need to do now is to add speed here, because it's from this point to this point that we want this to be smooth. So I'm going to select the keyframe that starts the animation. We've rotated this so I can go to the modifier, animation, and choose smooth. I'll just give that one more go, because now it starts off more gently, spins maybe a little faster, but comes to a gentle stop. Looks okay, I hope you'll agree. Now, one of the things I like to do from time to time is to hit Ctrl S to make sure I'm saving the work as I go along. So what we need to do next then is to select all of the other three and do much the same thing. So what I'm going to do is highlight all of these by using the shift-click method, because I know where these three need to be. I can slide them up and they'll now snap to the first one. But what I've got to do is to do exactly the same with these, which I did with my first one, to test everything was right. So at this point, opacity is 0. Now I'm going to clone all of these. I'm going to use Alt Insert, click down one, Alt Insert, Alt Insert. I can select all three of those and line them up. Well, maybe not. And I've dropped that one off a little bit, so let's move that one. Seem to have moved these a little bit off the 7-second mark. It's not vital, but of course it's going to happen. And if you really was that critical, well, then you would just select them all and retype in your 7 seconds. But at 7 seconds, of course, and we're working on this keyframe, this one and this one, not so much that one, then we want the opacity back up. Little test. There's the images all coming up nicely. Moving on to the next one, I'm going to click into the top right, Alt Insert, Alt Insert for the bottom left, and Alt Insert for the bottom right. Select them all, and I know they need to go at the 12-second point. I'll use the keyframe time here. But of course nothing needs to happen between these 2 points, but now we're moving to a little bit of a crucial point here. Let's move along again and Alt Insert. Remember, I'm cloning every time. If you're really careful, you can probably get these smack in the middle, but I generally put them in by selecting them and dialing in the value. A fraction of a second for what we're doing here is probably not going to make a great deal of difference, but it could do as they spun round. One of them may be lagging a little bit behind. So I've got the last three now. So we need to do the rotation. But of course I cannot do all three together. I need to select the bottom left first, because the bottom left turns the same way as the top. So let's remind ourselves what happens. The top is a -180. So if we go to the bottom left and we want that spinning the right way, or the same way, then we need -180 there. So that when we run the animation, those two there spin the same way. And the reason they're not spinning exactly the same is because we don't have the speed applied to the bottom left one yet. But what it means is the one that's at the top right, if I select that keyframe, and the one that's at the bottom right, and if I select that keyframe, then we know what the rotation is, because if this one was -180 and the other one bottom left was -180, then these two just need to be 180. And we should have all of our animation working as we expected it to. Now I think the rest of this is pretty much repetition, so I'm going to clone 3 more keyframes here, because nothing happens between here and here, and then 3 more keyframes here, and the last 3 we need to fade out. Spinning round of the screen indicates I've done that, so let's just put the cursor at the start and have one look, because the one thing I haven't done is added the speed, but we can tell that everything's working okay. Up they come okay. Viewing them on screen looks pretty good. we've got our spin around, and then we're going to have 4 new images, of course, which we've yet to do, and then they fade out. We view the background for a couple of seconds before we move on. So the last thing is to consider the speed here, and that's pretty simple because we've already chosen the speed of smooth, so we need to add that to each of those parts of the animation. So we can start with the top right, identify where we want it to go, and it's going to be there, of course. I picked the wrong keyframe there. If I'd have put my speed at that keyframe, nothing would have happened because that keyframe commands this to do nothing, so we wouldn't have seen a thing. So there we have it. Top right is the one we're working on. Select the right keyframe, go to the rotate, animation speed and smooth, and we can do the same with this one, and finally the last one. Then we really need to think about saving this again, making sure we've got it all right. But before we do, just make sure we've got the speed right, because they should all turn beautifully together now, and they do. Now we need to come to put the image on the other side of each of these images. Now I'm going to select just the top left to do this to start with, and it doesn't really matter where we do this, but I'm just going to pick the top left. But if I select a position around there, then when I select the top left image and apply the image, we should see it because we've already gone past the revolving part of our animation. So let's select the 4th of the keyframes just to help us. What I'm going to do here is right click the top left image and add an image. I'm doing it this way because I'm adding this as a parent and child, or this one as a child to this one, which is the parent. So let's add it. Now you can see why I put the number 1 on here. It looks rather odd because it's the wrong way round. Now it's all to do with the 3D, so what I need to do with image 1, with its keyframe, because this image 1 is going to take the same animation as our top left, parent and child relationship, whatever the parent does, the child will follow. But what I need to do is to turn this around on here, don't I? I need to give it a 180. So now it looks right, but when I go back to the start to test my animation, I can see number 1, and that's not correct either. So we need to go to the properties, and we need to say don't show us the back side of number 1. So now when I press play, we get the fade on. Although we're not seeing the keyframes of the others, they're going to work. There we've got the 4 images, 5 seconds to view them, and when they spin round we should see number 1 on the back, and we're reassured that everything is the correct way because I'm using that number 1. Very easy to orientate it when we're working in 3D. And once we know what we need to do with one of them, then of course the top right, bottom left, bottom right, we do exactly the same. Now I'm going to do each of these individually, and we can just walk through what we're doing here. I'm going to take the top right, right click, add an image, and we need to select number 2. Now this time number 2 is the correct way round. Last time it was the wrong way round. Why the difference? It's just the position of the cursor, because before we had the cursor somewhere up here, and when we move it up there we can see when this spins round it is in fact going to show us number 2 the wrong way round. So we need to select the first keyframe for number 2. Well, it's the only keyframe actually, and we just need to spin this around to get the orientation right, which is 180. But we do, if we go back to the start, need to remember to go to the properties as well and say don't show me the back side. Let's do another one. Bottom left, right click, add an image, number 3, but we start to get used to this after a little while, and we can go straight to the values that we want, and we can fix them pretty quickly. Let's try the bottom right. Right click, add the child image. Number 4. We'll do the backside straight away. We'll go to the animation and we'll say give me 180 in the rotate Y. Now we need a look at what we have. Image fades on screen, 2 seconds on, 4 images fade up. They sit there for 5 seconds and then rotate 3D in opposite directions, revealing 1, 2, 3, 4. All we need to do now is to save this, and we can replace 1, 2, 3, 4 very easily. Now we need to fully test what we've done, because we do have one final thing we need to do. But I think it may be worthwhile to do the test in the main screen so we can see the animation we've created alongside the fade on and off. So we'll begin with the pelicans, which is just before the image we've created, and I'll press play and we'll just watch the mini player. There's the background. We can add some changes to that a little bit later on if we wish. There's the 4 insets, which should spin round any second to reveal 1, 2, 3, 4. But one of the things that we find now doesn't happen is that the 1, 2, 3, 4 remain on screen, because although we set the fade off for the parent object, the parent will guide the child when it comes to animation, but it doesn't do the same thing when we talk about fading the image out. When you think it through, that gives us more scope actually, but it does mean we've got to just make a slight change to the end of the animation. When we come back to the objects and animation screen, from the 20-second point to the 22-second point, we created a fade out of our parent object. But then of course we changed things by putting a child in its place. So we need to fade out the child. I think the best way to do that is to select all 4 of those just by holding the control key, and up here I'm going to put in my keyframes, and I'm going to put in 2 keyframes on each line because I need one at 20 and one at 22, or was it 22 and 24? We'll take a look in a moment. For now, Alt, Insert, Insert, so 2 on the top, and the same there, and there. So it was 20 and 22 were the 2 values we want. So let's take these and reveal the keyframe time. We'll make them 20, and these 4 we may as well do them straight away at 22. So if I select all of these, we want 1, 2, 3 and 4 to be fully solid on screen, but at this keyframe we want them all to be gone. Let's go back to the start and press play, and we'll just take one last look here, because everything should be working perfectly. Spinning around to reveal the other images, and they're going to be very easy to replace in a few moments. And our final fade out back to the car or whatever background we chose to give. So all we need to do now is quickly change those dummy images, and that is pretty quick to do. Just select the first one, number 1, go to the Properties tab and the Picture option, and when we click, the panel will open up and it's automatically gone to where I'm working. There's the 4 images on the other side of our 3D, so we can just pick up these others at random. Let's pick up color ones, so I'll pick up the bird picture. Number 2, we'll select the balloons. Number 3, we'll select the building. And finally, number 4, we'll take the red panda. One final thing we need to do, just select them again, because we need to match the border that we applied before. And I think I applied 0.8 to make sure we could view it well. So to bring this to a close, we're going to have one more viewing, and we'll take a quick look at that in the mini player. In the next video, I'm going to offer a suggestion where we can vary this very slightly, and also how we can make and apply a slide style. So beginning with the image just before our 3D animation, we'll make a start. There's the background image, the 4 inserts that we've seen now a few times. When they spin round, we should have 4 completely new images, and of course we know that we've got them all of the right way round. We've got no problems with images reversed. And they fade out to finish, and we move on to the next slide in our sequence.